Rain pounded against the cracked windshield as a sealed mahogany box sat on the passenger seat, carrying an unspoken threat. Delivering it meant a quick $2,000. Handing it directly into the cold, calculating eyes of Chicago's most untouchable syndicate leader meant she was already a dead woman walking. Madeline Hayes lived by 3 strict rules: never look inside the package, never ask the sender's motives, and never, under any circumstances, make a delivery past midnight. For 3 years, operating as a high-end, off-the-books courier in Chicago, these rules had kept her breathing. They kept her hidden from the ghosts of a past she had spent a decade trying to bury. But tonight, the rules were shattered by a desperate phone call from Richard Sullivan, her dispatcher. Sullivan was a grizzled man who didn't scare easily, yet his voice had trembled over the encrypted line. The job was simple on paper: deliver a locked mahogany box to Penthouse 4B at the prestigious St. Regis Tower. The recipient was listed as Arthur Pendleton, an aging corporate magnate known for his reclusive habits. The payout was $10,000 in untraceable cash, 5 times her usual rate. Madeline knew the money was a red flag, a flashing neon sign warning her to walk away. But her forged passport was expiring, and she needed the funds to disappear again. The storm outside was violent, a classic Midwestern gale that whipped freezing rain against the concrete canyons of the city. Madeline pulled her trench coat tighter around her slight frame, adjusting the brim of her fedora to shield her face from the lobby security cameras. The St. Regis was a fortress of marble and glass, a playground for billionaires and criminals who wore expensive suits. She bypassed the main concierge, using the service elevator code Sullivan had provided. The elevator ascended with a nauseating speed, depositing her on the top floor. The corridor was unnervingly silent, the thick Persian carpets absorbing the sound of her footsteps. She reached the heavy oak door of Penthouse 4B. The brass plaque confirmed the number. She raised a gloved hand and knocked twice. No answer. She knocked again, harder this time. The door yielded slightly, unlatched. A chill crawled up Madeline's spine. A cardinal rule of the underground courier service was to never enter a client's premises, but the $10,000 hinged on a physical handover and a signature. Pushing the door open, Madeline stepped into a sprawling, dimly lit living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the storm ravaging Lake Michigan. The air smelled of expensive whiskey, rain, and something metallic. Gun oil. "Mr. Pendleton?" Madeline called out, her voice steady, despite the hammer pounding in her chest. "Arthur isn't here tonight," a voice replied from the shadows. It was a deep, resonant baritone, smooth as aged bourbon, but carrying a jagged edge of authority. A man stepped out from the darkness of the adjacent study. He wasn't the septuagenarian corporate magnate she had been briefed to expect. He was in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit without a tie. His dark hair was perfectly styled, but it was his eyes that made Madeline freeze. They were a striking, predatory amber, analyzing her with terrifying precision. A faint, jagged scar ran along his jawline, a brutal imperfection on an otherwise aristocratic face. Madeline instantly recognized the aura of power. This wasn't a businessman. This was a predator. "I have a secure delivery for Arthur Pendleton," Madeline said, maintaining her professional composure. She gripped the mahogany box tightly. "If he isn't here, I'll have to return the package to the sender." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the man said, stepping closer into the ambient light of the city skyline. "The men who sent that box are not the type to accept a return to sender. Hand it over. I'll sign for Arthur. My instructions are strictly for Mr. Pendleton." Madeline took a calculated step back toward the door. "Your instructions," he murmured, closing the distance between them with a terrifying, silent grace, were compromised the moment Sullivan picked up the phone. Arthur Pendleton is currently bleeding out in the trunk of a Lincoln town car somewhere near the docks. I am taking his deliveries tonight. Madeline's breath hitched. She had walked directly into a syndicate takeover. The man standing before her wasn't just a hitman. The effortless command in his posture suggested he was the one pulling the strings. "Who are you?" she demanded, her survival instincts screaming at her to drop the box and run. "My name is Leonardo Santoro," he said smoothly. The name hit Madeline like a physical blow. The Santoro crime family. They controlled the entire eastern seaboard's narcotics and weapons trade, and clearly they were now staking their claim in Chicago. Leonardo was the ruthless heir, a man whispered about in the darkest corners of the underworld as a phantom who left no loose ends. "Take it," Madeline said, shoving the heavy box toward his chest. "I don't need a signature. I don't need the money. Just let me walk out of here." Leonardo took the box, his fingers brushing against hers. His skin was warm, a sharp contrast to his cold demeanor. He didn't move out of her way. Instead, he stared down at the polished wood, a dark amusement dancing in his amber eyes. "You aren't curious about what Arthur was hiding?" Leonardo asked, tilting his head. "I don't care," Madeline snapped, sidestepping him. "My job is done." "Wait," Leonardo commanded. The sheer force in his voice stopped her dead in her tracks. He walked over to the marble kitchen island, setting the box down. From his pocket, he produced a slim steel lockpick. Within 3 seconds, the brass lock on the mahogany box clicked open. Madeline shouldn't have looked. She should have run out the door. But the hypnotic pull of the moment kept her rooted to the spot. Leonardo flipped the lid open. Inside, resting on a bed of crimson velvet, was not a weapon, nor a drive of blackmailed secrets. It was a silver locket, heavily tarnished, bearing the crest of a roaring lion. Leonardo stared at the object, the amused smirk vanishing from his face, replaced by a sudden, dangerous intensity. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Madeline felt the blood drain from her face. She recognized that crest. It was the exact same crest tattooed on the back of her left shoulder. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the relentless drumming of the rain against the penthouse glass. Leonardo reached into the box, his large fingers delicately tracing the engraved lion on the silver locket. "Arthur Pendleton," Leonardo whispered, his voice dangerously low, was a highly cautious man. He was laundering $50 million a month for the Russian mob. "I came here to intercept his ledger. But he didn't send a ledger away tonight, did he?" He turned to look at Madeline. His amber eyes were no longer just analytical. They were blazing with a volatile mix of shock, rage, and a profound, terrifying recognition. "He sent this," Leonardo continued, holding up the locket by its silver chain. It swayed like a pendulum between them. A piece of a past that was supposed to be reduced to ash 10 years ago in Brooklyn. Madeline forced her face into a mask of total indifference. "I don't know what that is. I just deliver the packages, Mr. Santoro. Now, if you'll excuse me." She turned toward the door, her hand reaching for the brass handle. "Stop running, Victoria." The name dropped into the quiet room like a live grenade. Madeline froze, her hand hovering inches from the doorknob. Her heart stopped, then restarted with a violent, erratic rhythm. No one had called her Victoria in a decade. Madeline Hayes did not exist before 2016. Madeline Hayes liked indie music, drank oat milk lattes, and kept her head down. Victoria Castiglione was the only daughter of the Castiglione syndicate, a girl who had watched her entire family burn to the ground in a brutal turf war. She slowly turned around, dropping the innocent courier facade. Her posture straightened, her chin lifted, and the terrified girl vanished, replaced by the hardened survivor who had outlived a massacre. "How do you know that name?" she asked, her voice lethal and calm. Leonardo took a slow, deliberate step toward her. The harsh overhead lighting caught the scar on his jaw, illuminating the years of violence he had endured. "You dye your hair blonde. You change your posture. You bury your accent," Leonardo said, his gaze sweeping over her. "But you can't change your eyes, Tori. You have your father's cold, calculating stare. I would know it anywhere." "My father is dead," Victoria spat, the venom in her voice surprising even herself. "And so is the girl you think you recognize. I am Madeline Hayes." "Madeline Hayes is a ghost," Leonardo countered, stopping just 3 feet away. "But Victoria Castiglione is a very real, very dangerous liability. The Castiglione heir. The girl who supposedly died in the fire that claimed the rest of her family." He held up the locket. "Arthur Pendleton was your father's consigliere before he changed his name and fled to Chicago. He had this locket. Inside it is the master key to the offshore accounts your father hid before the Santoro family wiped him out." Victoria's mind raced. Arthur Pendleton was actually Arthur Penhaligon? The man who had bounced her on his knee when she was a child. "If the Santoros wiped my family out," Victoria said, slipping a hand into the deep pocket of her trench coat, wrapping her fingers around the grip of her concealed tactical knife, "then why are you standing here talking to me? Finish the job, Leonardo, or are you too soft to kill a woman?" Leonardo didn't flinch. Instead, a muscle feathered in his jaw. "If I wanted you dead, Tori, you wouldn't have made it off the elevator. My father ordered the hit on your family. I was the one who left the back door of your estate unlocked so you could escape into the woods." The revelation struck her like a physical blow. Victoria stumbled back, shaking her head. "You're lying. You were a foot soldier for your father. You hated us." "I hated the war," Leonardo corrected softly, "and I wasn't about to let an 18-year-old girl burn alive for the sins of her father. I let you go. I spent 10 years making sure my family thought you were dead. And now you walk directly into my hands, carrying the very key that could fund a massive retaliation against my own blood." Before Victoria could process the weight of his words, a sharp, electronic beep echoed through the penthouse. Leonardo's head snapped towards the digital security panel on the wall. The screen was flashing red. "Breach, lobby, breach, elevator 1. Leonardo swore violently in Italian. He dropped the locket into his pocket and drew a suppressed Heckler & Koch USP from his shoulder holster in one fluid motion. "Who is that?" Victoria demanded, drawing her knife, her courier persona entirely discarded. "I took this building an hour ago. My men were in the lobby," Leonardo said, moving rapidly to the heavy oak door and sliding 3 deadbolts into place. "If that alarm is going off, it means my men are dead, which means the people coming up that elevator aren't mine." "Then whose are they?" Leonardo turned to look at her, the gravity of the situation darkening his amber eyes. "Pendleton was a rat, Victoria. He didn't just call a courier tonight. He called the Russian Bratva to extract him. They are coming for the locket, and they are coming for the money." Heavy, synchronized footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "And if they find you here," Leonardo said, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the back of the penthouse, "they won't just kill you. They will parade the resurrected Castiglione princess through the streets before they cut you to pieces." "I don't need your protection," Victoria hissed, trying to wrench her arm away. "Good," Leonardo replied grimly, tossing her a spare magazine from his belt, "because we have about 30 seconds before they blow that door off its hinges, and I only have 14 bullets." The heavy oak door of penthouse 4B didn't just open, it splintered into 1,000 jagged projectiles as a breaching charge detonated in the corridor. The concussive shockwave threw Victoria against the marble kitchen island. The air instantly filled with the acrid stench of C4 and pulverized drywall. Before the dust could even begin to settle, 3 figures clad in black tactical gear poured through the ruined doorway, their suppressed AKS-74U rifles sweeping the room with lethal precision. Leonardo didn't hesitate. He was a phantom in the smoke. He fired twice. Puff, puff. And the lead Russian dropped heavily onto the Persian rug, clutching a shattered Kevlar visor. "Move!" Leonardo roared over the deafening blare of the building's emergency sirens. He laid down covering fire, shattering the floor-to-ceiling windows to create a chaotic distraction of howling wind and torrential rain. The storm immediately invaded the penthouse, sending expensive lamps and paperwork flying. Victoria didn't freeze. The decade she had spent hiding had not softened the survival instincts bred into her by the Castiglione bloodline. She dove behind a heavy suede sofa, her fingers gripping the spare magazine Leonardo had tossed her. A second assailant flanked the living room, zeroing in on her position. As the mercenary rounded the sofa, Victoria lunged from the shadows. She drove her tactical knife upward, bypassing the heavy body armor and striking the vulnerable gap beneath his armpit. The man choked, his rifle clattering to the floor. Victoria ruthlessly yanked the weapon free, scooped up his fallen Glock 19, and rolled back into cover just as a hail of bullets shredded the upholstery where she had been a second prior. "Mo, you know how to use that!" Leonardo yelled over the chaos, crouching behind a shattered mahogany bookshelf. Blood was trickling from a shallow graze on his temple, a stark crimson line against his pale skin. "I grew up in a syndicate, Santoro!" Victoria fired 3 rapid shots, forcing the remaining gunmen in the hallway to duck for cover. "I wasn't taking ballet classes." "Down the hall, the master suite," Leonardo commanded, tossing a stun grenade toward the corridor. The blinding flash bought them exactly 4 seconds. They sprinted down the hallway, the hardwood floors slick with rain blowing in from the ruined living room. Leonardo kicked open the double doors of the master bedroom and immediately slammed them shut, engaging the heavy steel deadbolt. "There's no way out of here," Victoria panted, her chest heaving as she checked the ammunition in the Glock. "We're on the 50th floor. Unless you can fly, this is a dead end." "The St. Regis was built by a paranoid billionaire," Leonardo said, his amber eyes scanning the opulent room. He moved toward a massive, walk-in closet lined with custom Italian suits and racks of expensive leather footwear. He pushed aside a row of heavy winter coats to reveal a seamless, wood-paneled wall. Arthur Pendleton was paranoid enough to insist on a private service chute. It goes straight down to the sub-basement laundry. He pressed a sequence of numbers into a hidden keypad. The wall hissed, sliding back to reveal a cramped, industrial lift meant for laundry carts and discreet exits. Gunfire erupted against the bedroom doors behind them. The wood began to splinter. "Get in," Leonardo ordered, shoving her into the metallic box. He climbed in after her, hitting the descent button just as the bedroom doors gave way. The lift dropped with a stomach-churning lurch, plunging them into absolute darkness. The tight confines of the shaft forced them together. Victoria was pressed against Leonardo's chest, the metallic scent of his gun oil mingling with the copper tang of his blood and the expensive bergamot of his cologne. In the pitch black, surrounded by the deafening hum of the elevator cables, the reality of the situation crashed over her. She was locked in a dark box with the head of the Santoro family. "You're bleeding," Victoria noted, her voice barely a whisper in the dark, betraying none of the panic swirling in her chest. "It's a graze," Leonardo replied, his chest rising and falling heavily against hers. Even in the dark, she could feel the intense heat of his gaze. You handle yourself well under fire, Tori. Madeline Hayes is full of surprises. Stop calling me Tori, she snapped, though there was no real venom left in her voice, only a profound exhaustion. And I handle myself because I had to learn how to survive after your family burned my world to the ground. The lift hit the sub-basement with a heavy jolt, throwing her off balance. Leonardo caught her waist, his large hands firm and grounding. He didn't let go immediately. I told you, Leonardo said softly, his tone vibrating with a dark sincerity. I let you go that night because I knew the truth. And tonight, you are going to learn it, too. He pushed the grated door open, leading her out into the cavernous, damp concrete of the St. Regis sub-basement. Above them, the sirens continued to wail, a distant symphony of the chaos they had just escaped. They stole a charcoal-grey Dodge Charger from the VIP parking section, Leonardo hot-wiring the vehicle with the effortless skill of a man who had spent his youth on the gritty streets before ascending to the throne. They drove in silence through the torrential rain, tearing down Lower Wacker Drive, avoiding the main arteries of Chicago, where the police response would be swarming. Leonardo navigated the labyrinth of underground streets until they reached a nondescript warehouse in the West Loop, an industrial district transitioning into high-end lofts. He pulled the Charger into a secure loading bay, the heavy metal doors rolling shut behind them, sealing them away from the storm and the prying eyes of the city. The safe house inside was Spartan, but heavily fortified. Concrete walls, a few leather chairs, a medical kit on a steel table, and a bank of encrypted servers humming in the corner. Sit, Leonardo instructed, pointing to a chair as he tossed his suit jacket onto the table. He moved to a small sink, washing the blood from his face. Victoria didn't sit. She paced the length of the room, still gripping the Glock. I want answers, Leonardo. You dragged me into this. You said Arthur Pendleton was my father's consigliere. You said the locket is the key. Tell me what is going on before I put a bullet in your knee and walk out of here. Leonardo dried his face with a towel and turned to look at her. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast deep shadows across his aristocratic face, emphasizing the jagged scar on his jaw. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the tarnished silver locket. My father ordered the hit on the Castiglione family, Leonardo stated, walking over to the bank of servers. But he didn't orchestrate it. He was hired. Victoria stopped pacing. The air in the room grew thin. Hired? The Santoros answer to no one. Everyone answers to $50 million, Victoria, Leonardo said grimly. He used his tactical knife to pry the back panel of the silver locket open. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. Concealed within the silver casing was a micro SD card. He extracted it delicately and inserted it into a secure card reader on his terminal. Lines of code and encrypted banking data began to flood the dual monitors. 10 years ago, your father was preparing to legitimize the Castiglione Empire, Leonardo explained, his fingers flying across the keyboard to bypass the encryption. He moved the family's entire liquid fortune, over $500 million, into a ghost account in Zurich. He wanted to wash his hands of the blood and buy a legitimate future for you. Victoria felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. My father wanted out? Yes. But not everyone in your family shared his vision for a peaceful, civilian life. Leonardo hit the enter key. The screen flashed green, decrypting the final firewall. Arthur Pendleton wasn't just hiding the money. He was holding it for the man who paid my father to execute your parents. A face and a name appeared on the screen, alongside a series of wire transfers dated back to the night of the Brooklyn massacre. Victoria stared at the monitor, all the blood draining from her face. Her hands began to tremble, the Glock slipping from her grasp and clattering onto the concrete floor. Dominic Castiglione, her uncle, the man who had wept at her parents' empty caskets, the man who had sworn blood vengeance against the Santoro family, rallying the remnants of their syndicate to war. Dominic, Victoria whispered, a suffocating betrayal wrapping around her throat. He paid your father to kill his own brother. He wanted the throne, and he wanted the 500 million, Leonardo said, his voice unusually gentle. But Arthur Pendleton took the account keys and vanished. Dominic has spent 10 years searching for Arthur, and he finally found him tonight. The Russians, Victoria realized, her eyes wide as she looked at Leonardo. They weren't working for Arthur. They were working for Dominic. Dominic sent them to retrieve the locket. Exactly, Leonardo confirmed. And instead of Arthur, they found you, the true heir, the only person legally capable of walking into that Zurich bank and claiming the money. The moment Dominic realizes you are alive, he won't stop until you are dead. You are the only loose end standing between him and a $500 million empire. Victoria backed away from the screen, her back hitting the cold concrete wall. 10 years of running. 10 years of hiding under the guise of Madeline Hayes, a meaningless courier delivering secrets in the dead of night. She had spent a decade hating the Santoro family, only to find out the architect of her destruction shared her own last name. Tears of pure, unadulterated rage pricked her eyes. She fiercely wiped them away. Leonardo closed the distance between them. He didn't crowd her, but his presence was a heavy, comforting anchor in the spiraling chaos of her mind. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a fraction of a second before gently cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing against her cheekbone. I spent 10 years keeping you off the radar, Victoria, Leonardo said, his amber eyes burning with a fierce, possessive intensity. I killed my own father to take control of this syndicate, just to ensure the hunt for the Castiglione girl was permanently called off. Victoria looked up at him, the jagged edges of his past mirroring her own. The Mafia Boss of Chicago, the ruthless phantom of the underworld, had torn apart his own empire to protect the girl he was supposed to kill. The tension between them, simmering since the moment she walked into the penthouse, suddenly shifted from adversarial to an electric, overwhelming gravity. Why? She breathed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Because in a world built on lies and blood, Leonardo whispered, lowering his face until his lips were inches from hers. You were the only innocent thing I ever encountered, and I'll be damned if I let Dominic Castiglione finish what he started. Victoria didn't pull away. The terrified courier, Madeline Hayes, officially died in that warehouse. In her place stood Victoria Castiglione, reborn in the ashes of betrayal, fueled by a vengeance that matched the dark fire in Leonardo's eyes. Dominic wants the throne, Victoria said, her voice dropping to a lethal, velvet whisper. She reached up, gripping the lapels of Leonardo's blood-stained shirt, pulling him just a fraction closer. Then we are going to burn it to the ground with him on it. Leonardo's mouth curved into a dangerous, predatory smile. I thought you'd never ask, Mia Regina. The storm raged on outside, but inside the concrete walls of the warehouse, a new syndicate was born. A deadly alliance forged in silver, sealed in blood, and bound by a vengeance that Chicago would never forget. Did Victoria and Leonardo's explosive alliance leave you breathless? If you loved this intense mafia romance, full of dark secrets, betrayals, and high-stakes drama, don't keep it to yourself. Smash that like button, share this story with your fellow romance addicts, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, pulse-pounding tales Drop a comment below telling us what you think Victoria and Leonardo will do to Uncle Dominic. Stay tuned for more.